Thank you for joining us again for part 2 of Gareth Porter on Iran, United States, and the possibility of war. One of the primary reasons that the war favorers, some might call them warmongers, are giving about the reasons for attacking Iran is Iran's declaration, they say, that it, quote, wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, and 2, that this nuclear energy program that Iran's developing is actually a nuclear weapons program. Is this a legitimate claim?
Well, first of all, on the argument that President Ahamdinejad threatened to wipe Israel off the map, there are issues about the translation of that, of course, as to what that really meant. And, if you look at it in the context not only of his entire speech, but of Iranian policy, what is very clear is that what was meant by that was that they want to change the regime in Israel, just as the United States wants to change the regime in Iran, that they do not accept the legitimacy of the existing Israeli regime because of its denial of the rights of the Palestinians, and that they are essentially calling for the rights of the Palestinians to make the decision about what sort of regime Israel should have.
But it's one thing to say the Palestinians' rights should be respected. It's entirely another thing if it's indicated in some way that Iran itself is going to try to take out this regime.
Well, exactly. And so that's why I think the key point that is missing from this public discourse, this political discourse about Iran's policy toward Israel, is the fact that 10 days after that October 25th, 2005 speech by Ahmadinejad, the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, made a statement in which he corrected Ahmadinejad's rhetoric and basically said that Iran will not threaten the rights of any other nation. And that, of course, was explicitly a reference to Israel.
It hasn't quieted Ahmadinejad's rhetoric very much. It wasn't long after that he organized this Holocaust conference to try to deny there'd been a Holocaust.
Well, I think one has to distinguish between the position of Ahmadinejad and Iranians, as well as other Arab Middle Easterners, by the way, on the Holocaust. And Ahmadinejad has actually addressed this on a number of occasions. His position on the Holocaust is not so much it did not happen, but that he is really trying to assert that even if it did happen, it was unjust that it be used to justify what has happened in the Middle East with Israel's position.
True enough, but you could take that position without having a conference that you organize members of the American Nazi Party to have a conversation about whether, in fact, there was a Holocaust.
Well, I agree that it was.
Don't think the Holocaust.
It's a provocative position to take, but I think
which I'm getting at is why the continued level of inflammatory rhetoric. Like he could clearly come out and say we support the struggle of the Palestinians, without constantly using language like, even if it's a correct interpretation, the Zionist state is doomed. You can say is not, preparation for an Iranian attack on Israel. On the other hand, why choose such words?
Well, I think that there are two reasons. One is that, he actually believes it personally. But I think, secondly, it is a play for winning Arab sentiment in the Sunni regimes who are opposed to Iran. And it's been very successful in that regard. It has been, in fact, one of the more successful strategies under Ahmadinejad to make a play for the majority sentiment in the Sunni Arab regimes.
Perhaps this recent statement by bin Laden the last couple of days, one to the American people, another to the Arab people, where he sort of lays claim to being the spokesperson for the Palestinian struggle. Right. Maybe this is a bit of bin Laden trying to compete with Iranian thunder on the issue.
I think that's probably right, that Iran has been so successful that it has changed the politics within the Arab world. But the other point that I want to make is that this is Ahmadinejad is a very, very controversial figure within Iran, not just among people who are opposed to the theocracy of Iran, but the theocratic political elite itself, the establishment of Iran, does not like Ahmadinejad. The people who actually have been running Iranian foreign policy for the last 20 years, certainly are not pro-Ahmadinejad. They're very critical of him. And that's why, you have Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, making this very overt, criticism of what the president of Iran had said.
But couldn't they do more in terms of distancing themselves from Ahmadinejad?
I think that some of the members of the elite, like former President Khatami, have been very overtly critical, and then you have others who are critical of Khatami's position, who are more strongly supportive of the existing system, who are equally critical of Ahmadinejad, but have to be much more careful about how they do it.
So Israel must be aware of the real politics of Iran. They have purportedly one of the best intelligence services, if not the best in the world. So they must also know that this is mostly Ahmadinejad's rhetoric and not real Iranian policy. Why do they consider Iran such a threat, or in fact, do they really, or is this rhetoric on their part?
Obviously, it's a mixed picture. I mean, you do have some true believers in Israel, obviously, who totally believe the idea that that Iran wants to get nuclear weapons to attack Israel. But I think if you look at the professional foreign affairs, national intelligence, national security structure of Israel, yes, they do understand the difference between Ahmadinejad's rhetoric and the actual policy that Iran has been following for a number of years. And they understand that Iran could be deterred if they did get nuclear weapons, and that this is not an existential threat in the same way that it's been presented by the extreme right in Israel and in the United States. Having said that, there's another threat that I think most of the Israeli establishment does believe Iran poses, and that is that if they were to get nuclear weapons, there would be a serious effect on the continued immigration of Jews into Israel. And that's what they're really afraid of, that simply having nuclear weapons would frighten away immigration and change the whole future demographics of Israel.
Is there any evidence that there is a nuclear weapons program in Iran?
There is evidence that there was some work that was nuclear weapons related up until 2003. There's no doubt in my mind that that's the case, that something happened, that there was some research that related to nuclear weapons. That does not mean, however, that the Iranian government or the national security establishment of Iran had made a decision to procure nuclear weapons by any means.
And if you take the national intelligence estimate of the American intelligence agencies, they concluded that, in fact, after 2003, the Iranian establishment concluded there would not be a weapons program.
Well, exactly, and I think the key point here is, why did they conclude that? Obviously, this is not just some gut instinct. They based that on some very hard evidence that they had gotten from a variety of sources. It had to be multiple sources, very reliable sources, sources that could not be refuted. And as I look back now at the evidence that we have on the public record, which is the beginning point for that estimate, it's very clear that in 2003 what happened was that the majority the people who have been running Iran's foreign policy, national security policy for the last 2 decades, made a fundamental decision, which was at the expense of those who did support nuclear weapons in Iran, the hardcore right-wing constituency of Ahmadinejad, and those bureaucratic elements who were obviously involved in this kind of research, who did want to have it go forward. They made a decision which those people did not like, and they made public their objection to it on the record after that decision was made. So this was not a unified Iranian regime making a decision which was for tactical reasons. We know that there was a fundamental difference within the Iranian regime between those who favored nuclear weapons and those who opposed it. And the people who opposed it won.
So perhaps what this really comes down to for Israel, and then it seems for the United States as a result, is really about Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran's role in the region. So in part 3 of our interview with Gareth Porter, we're going to discuss Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah.